Anyone over 45 in Germany is almost certainly familiar with Conrad Electronics. For an entire generation, the company was the go-to source for everything electronics. But ask someone under 30 today, and you'll often get nothing but a shrug. Many even believe Conrad doesn't exist anymore. The truth is, Conrad still exists, but the company has changed so fundamentally that it's almost unrecognizable. Who doesn't remember the legendary Conrad catalogs? Those hefty tomes that look like phone books and contain hundreds of pages full of resistors, capacitors, transistors, and components. You could spend hours leafing through them, dreaming of projects. Today, the stores are gone, the catalogs are no more. And yet, Conrad still generates almost €1 billion in revenue annually. How does that add up? Time to take a closer look at the company's history. It all began in Berlin in 1923. Max Conrad opened a small shop for radio components back then, and the timing couldn't have been better because regular radio broadcasting began in Germany that very year. People wanted to listen to the radio, but ready-made sets were incredibly expensive. So many simply built their own radios, and Max Conrad supplied them with the parts. Conrad had a knack for spotting trends. He recognized early on where things were headed and expanded his product range accordingly. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to enjoy his success for long. He died in 1929 at the age of only 50. His son took over the business. Werner was just in his early 20s at the time, but he continued what his father had started. In 1930, the first Conrad catalog was published, an illustrated reference work for everything the German radio industry produced. Werner expanded the mail order business and supplied customers all over the country. And then came 1936, a year that demonstrates just how far ahead of its time the Conrads were. While most Germans hadn't even seen a television, Conrad was offering a complete television kit at the Berlin Radio Exhibition. Included was a manual called Television from A to Z. Imagine that in 1936. Television was still in its infancy, and Conrad was already selling the components for it. Then came World War II and destroyed everything. Berlin was bombed, and as the front lines approached the capital, Werner Conrad sent his family west. The only thing that remained of the Conrad Company was a rucksack filled with variable capacitors and a few trimmers. Nothing more. With that, Werner Conrad fled west and eventually ended up in Hirschau in the Upper Palatinate, a small Bavarian town that hardly anyone had heard of at the time. Werner founded the company in 1946 under the name Werkje, essentially starting from scratch. 3 years later, he opened the first post-war branch in Nuremberg, Bavaria. In 1954, Klaus Conrad Werner's son joined the company. He would become the one who led Conrad to national prominence. Initially, he experimented with so-called technical department stores in Bavaria, a kind of precursor to the later Conrad branches. But Klaus quickly realized that the future lay in mail order and subsequently made a bold decision that many considered crazy at the time. He closed almost all the branches and focused entirely on catalog sales. In retrospect, it was exactly the right move. In 1976, Werner Conrad died, and Klaus suddenly found himself alone with a company that employed 220 people and was in the process of building its first logistics center in Hirschau. A year later, he invested in the first computer system, and suddenly, Conrad could ship 1,000 packages per day instead of just 150. That sounds like very little today, but it was revolutionary back then. While other mail-order companies were still using mechanical address systems, Conrad was already operating digitally. The 1980s then brought international expansion. Klaus Conrad thought far beyond the obvious. In 1984, the company was even one of the pioneers of private broadcasting in Germany, acquiring a stake in Radio C, which broadcast from South Tyrol to Bavaria. In 1988, Conrad founded CEI, Hong Kong, for sales in Asia. This was a clever move that made the company independent of expensive importers. This company still exists today. At the same time, the company returned to brick-and-mortar retail, this time on a grand scale. Over 30 Conrad branches were established throughout Europe. Customers could wander the aisles for hours, examining components, discussing technical details with the usually very knowledgeable staff, and constantly discovering new projects. And then, of course, there was the legendary Conrad catalog, at times up to 500 pages long. It was the heart of the company. Anyone who received a copy studied it from cover to cover. Each new issue was like Christmas for electronics enthusiasts. The product descriptions were detailed, the technical specifications were fully listed, and there were often even small circuit diagrams and DIY tips. In 1995, a large new logistics center was built in Wernigerode. Nothing could stop Conrad now. Or could it? Werner Conrad Jr., Klaus's son, officially took over the management of the company. Klaus had learned from his own father's experiences and wanted to consciously manage the transition differently. And Werner Jr. had big plans. That same year, something happened that once again made Conrad a pioneer. The company went online. The first web shop launched with 30,000 products, unimaginably few today, but groundbreaking at the time. Conrad was among the first 10 most visited online shops in Germany. In 1998, Conrad Business Supplies was founded to specifically target business customers. This would later prove to be a pioneering move. In 2013, Conrad acquired the Hungarian company SOS Electronic and the British company Rapid Electronics. The company continued to expand and seemed to be on a good path. But then came the major disruption. Amazon transformed global retail, and Conrad felt the effects brutally. Hardly anyone foresaw the force with which Amazon would sweep into the German market, said current CEO Ralph Buehler in a later interview. Suddenly, Conrad's prices were no longer competitive. Customers who had been loyal to Conrad for decades suddenly started ordering from Amazon, Alibaba, or eBay, often at rock-bottom prices from China. The brick-and-mortar stores became a problem. With their high rents and personnel costs, they simply couldn't compete with online prices. The stores, which had been the company's flagship for years, transformed into a financial burden. As early as 2019, the retail division was posting losses in the tens of millions. In 2020, Conrad closed all its stores in Switzerland. In 2021, locations in Dresden, Leipzig, and Nuremberg followed. Then came the big shock. In April 2022, Conrad announced the closure of almost all its retail stores. From over 30 locations, only one remained, in Wernigerode, right next to the company headquarters. For many loyal customers, it was a dark day, but Conrad didn't give up. Instead, the company underwent one of the most radical transformations in German retail history. In May 2019, Werner Conrad brought on board an experienced B2B expert, Ralph Buehler. Buehler came from Funnel, had 30 years of experience in sales and e-commerce, and initially became chief sales officer for the B2B business. On January 1st, 2021, he took over as CEO. His mission was clear: to transform Conrad from a retailer specializing in retail customers into a B2B specialist. Conrad developed a sourcing platform specifically for business customers. Instead of the 30,000 products offered in the first online shop, the platform now boasts over 10 million product listings from more than 1,000 suppliers. It's no longer a shop in the traditional sense. it's a marketplace for all kinds of technical equipment. This transformation has changed the company. Today, Conrad generates 80% of its revenue from business customers. We deliver from our extensive product range what can't be strategically planned. We're the fire brigade for purchasing, helping where others can't, explains CEO Buhler, describing the new positioning. Around 60,000 packages are shipped daily to 150 countries. From 2012 to 2014, the family invested 56 million euros in expanding the logistics center in Verberg Koblitz. This was the largest single investment in the company's history. Today, up to 100,000 packages can be processed there daily. What began in 1917 with 1,000 packages per day has now become a gigantic logistics machine. Conrad remains 100% family-owned. Brenner Conrad Jr. is chairman of the supervisory board and remains modest. I am only one part of our success. Every successful entrepreneur needs strong management and dedicated employees who are willing to explore new paths. In 2025, the management team was strategically expanded. Dr. Daniel Sager, a former Amazon manager, and Guy Dan, an experienced sales expert, joined the company as 2 new chief sales officers. This move prepares the company for its next phase of growth. The Conrad family is also active beyond the business. Klaus Conrad, now 88 years old, and his wife Gru, founded a foundation in 2000. The couple donate another €1 million to the Kuno Children's Hospital in Regensburg alone. The foundation also supports Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF, and other organizations. Over 2,000 projects have been supported to date. Klaus Conrad received the Bavarian Order of Merit and the Federal Cross of Merit for his contributions. Private customers can still shop online at Conrad. The website remains online, but the focus has clearly shifted. Conrad is concentrating on internationalization, cross-border commerce, and e-procurement. Artificial intelligence is already being used to process the vast amounts of product data. CEO Buhler is cautiously optimistic about the future. Conrad will further expand its position as a leading B2B procurement platform through internationalization. At the same time, topics such as sustainability and the use of AI for more efficient processes will gain in importance.